Today our session is opened by the presentation Maxim Demchenko, Moscow State Linguistic University, Moscow, Russia. Shri Bhagavadāchārya's commentary on Puruṣasūktam in the perspective of his Vedāntic vision. You're welcome.
Где презентация?
Сама презентация.
Namaskar, dosto. Today I'm going to speak about Sri Bhagavadāchārya, and first of all, I'll say a few words about who he is, because very few people are aware of his existence and his work, and then I will try to tackle the subject matter of my speech. Sri Bhagavadāchārya was one of the prominent scholars and philosophers in the tradition of Vishishtadvaita Vedanta. So yesterday we discussed Vishishtadvaita quite extensively, as Ruzanaji is also a specialist in Vishishtadvaita. But the thing is that mostly Vishishtadvaita is associated with Ramanujacharya and his tradition, while in the north of India, there's also a tradition of Ramanandacharya that was started in the 14th century by Ramanandacharya. And the issue is quite controversial because till early 20th century, Ramananda school was considered to be a branch of Ramanuja school, but then in early 20th century, they gained independence from the Ramanuja school, mostly due to the efforts of this Bhagavadāchārya. And the thing is that the school, to be independent, any school of Indian philosophy needs, of Vedantic philosophy in particular, needs its own commentary on the Prasthanatraya. If it doesn't have a commentary, it means that it will always be dependent on another school which possesses these commentaries. So Bhagavadāchārya tried to give this commentary, and he is one of only two traditional Bhashyakara, scholars who gave commentaries in Sanskrit on the whole core of Prasthanatraya. And his commentaries are called Janaki Kripa Bhashya. And the second one in the 20th century is also a Ramanandi, is Swami Bhagavadāchārya, Swami Rambhadracharya, Jagadguru Rambhadracharya, who is still alive and well, and he's the Jagadguru of Chitrakoot Peeth in Chitrakoot of Ramananda Sampradaya. So there are only two, as far as I know, only two full commentaries in Sanskrit on the whole Prasthanatraya. And the main difference in approaches of Bhagavadāchārya, of Ramanandis, and the Ramanuja school is that Ramanandis focus on Ram as the as Brahman, as the supreme deity, as the supreme reality. Otherwise, the way of thinking is quite similar. So Bhagavadāchārya wrote, as I said, commentaries on Bhagavadgītā, on the basic 16 Upanishads, and of course on Vedanta Sutra, on Brahma Sutras. But as well, he commented on some other scriptures and wrote a few, you can say, popular treatises to promote Vishishtadvaita Vedanta among common pandits. That was another social problem in Ramananda Sampradaya, is that if you approach a pandit who belongs to the school of Ramanuja, he will be aware of Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, and he will be able to carry out a shastrartha to a certain level. He will be able to speak on the philosophy. But most Ramanandis of that time, the early 20th century, they were not really aware of the philosophy of the sect. And this is why their teachings were kind of limited to the Bhakti. And that despite the fact that there had existed earlier philosophical works, for example, Ananda Bhashya, which is also a Bhashya ascribed to Ramanandacharya himself, but of course scholars doubt about that. and mostly in encyclopedias and monographs, we read that Ramanandacharya hadn't left any commentary, and this is why they were dependent on the Ramanuja school. But still, there is a treatise called Ananda Bhashya, and it could have been written maybe in the late 18th century, early 19th century, and ascribed to Ramanandacharya. But the problem was that people, mostly Pandits, were not aware of that, and Ramanandis were kind of merging into the general Hindu communities. Like they could not identify themselves as devotees of a particular sect, of a particular sampradaya. So that was the problem, and Bhagavadāchārya tried to tackle this problem. Now, coming to the subject matter, after that introduction, I will mention one more thing, is that, another technical thing you can say, is that unfortunately, despite the fact that Bhagavadāchārya set the foundation, the basis of contemporary Ramanandi philosophy and Ramanandi thought, he's in a way forgotten. So he just laid the foundation, and his legacy is being used without his name. Actually, many pravachans and scholarly discourses on Ramanandi Vedanta, Ramanandi Sahitya, is based on his thought, but personally he's not mentioned. And when I got to know about him, that was in 2009, when I was in Gurukul of Srimad. That was exactly the place where I started studying Hindi, by the way. I mean, properly speaking, because before that I could speak, but not that well, you can say. So exactly there, I got in touch with Bhagavadāchārya's not really disciples, but admirers, and I got to know about him. But to find his literature was a real challenge, and that was the real research work. Only a few years back, I found a pustakalaya, not in sense of a bookstore, but of some treasury, of library of books in Bhagavadāchārya's Smarak Bhavan in Ayodhya. And books were in very, very bad condition. They're literally decaying and dying off. So I thought that it would be nice to not only to save some of them at least, but also to translate them into English. So my digest of some of his papers in translations into English from basically Hindi and Sanskrit in a way, so it's already prepared for publishing. So I hope I'll be able to publish that. So it was a full research process. So the paper I'm presenting today is based on these found materials, because it has never been republished. But for example, Bhagavadāchārya also had a journal magazine called Tattvadarshi, where he published excerpts of his papers, of his works, commentaries, as far as he was in progress of writing them. Also, there are very old editions, as you can see. It's like 1930, the end of 1930s, you can say. So it's very early paper. So that's the library. So yeah, coming back to the subject matter, Puruṣasūktam is very important for the whole discourse of Sri Sampradaya, because it was important to prove for Ramanujacharya and for the Ramanandis, or later Ramanandi tradition, that the Purush in Puruṣasūktam is Vishnu Narayana, because otherwise it can be this image can be ascribed to other deities, like it can be Shiva and some Shaiva schools, and this is why they try to use it as a basis, as a perfectly Vedic basis of their discussions. As most other suppositions they make, they are not based on the Vedas themselves directly, but on the Upanishads, which are of course Shruti as well. But for these Vaishnavas, it was important to prove that in the Samhitas, in the Vedas themselves, they can find foundation for their religion. Also because when the British scholarship came to India, the Vaishnavas were one of the main targets of a discussion. They are non-Vedic, and they are purely agamic tradition. which has nothing to do with the Vedas, and that this is Yamunacharya and Ramanujacharya, who artificially reconcile this agamic tradition with the Vedic tradition. So this is why Bhagavadāchārya tackles this Puruṣasūktam again, to prove that Vaishnavas have a foundation. I will probably read an excerpt from my translation of his commentary, and then comment a little bit on that, on his basic ideas. So he starts with commenting on the famous original verse where Purush is described as Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha. Purusha has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 legs. And Bhagavadāchārya writes here that the expression 1,000 heads does not literally imply that he has 1,000 heads. It means that the number of his heads is limitless. If the word 1,000 was used in a direct numerical sense, the supreme ruler would have been limited, as 1,000 is a particular quantity. So that's an important point for him. All of the figures in the Puruṣasūktam, unlike some literalists propose in the discussion of the Suktam, they are kind of allegoric. This is alankar, you can say. It's kind of alankar for discussing it. And also in the material nature, there are 2 eyes per 1 head. Thus, the one who has 1,000 heads cannot have 1,000 eyes. There will be 2,000 at least. And then he goes on to prove the Vishishtadvaita in basic key concept that there is the Brahman and there are Visheshanas, they're qualifying him. And his idea here is to prove that already on the level of Puruṣasūktam, the idea of Vishishtadvaita Vedanta is there. And all other understandings are not that straightforward in comparison with the Vishishtadvaita understanding. So he says that the whole universe is the supreme ruler's body. Gods, human beings, cattle, birds, and others are parts of this world. The supreme spirit pervades everything in his Virat Rupa by means of his universal energy, Virat Shakti. So there's no duality between a body, Sharira, and one who possesses the body, Shariri. Here, the important thing is that the word Shakti is basically a non-Vedantic term. So just like some other medieval Vedantins, and unlike Śrīpada Shankaracharya, he would introduce the Shakti Parinama idea, and probably in this respect he differs from Ramanujacharya. So it's important to say that despite the fact that this is a Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, it's a unique school, unique trend in Vishishtadvaita Vedanta. So we know from the Ramanuja's philosophy that a Brahman of Vishnu is qualified by his Visheshana, that is Jivas and Prakriti. But at the same time, he does not actually speculate much on how it happens, like how Jivas and Prakriti qualified Brahman. And Bhagavadāchārya introduces here the idea of Shakti. This is by means of Shakti Parinama. It would be qualified, just like, for example, if we see the rays of the sun. So the sun is qualified by the rays in many terms. First of all, the question is when the emanation started of this Visheshana of Jivas and Prakriti. And Bhagavadāchārya would say that never, just as like the sun is permanently emitting the sun rays. We cannot say when sun rays started emitting from the sun. So it's a permanent process. If we imagine that the sun is eternal, just like Brahman, then the emanation will be eternal. And this is why we cannot speak about the beginning of the emanation. And even the word emanation is wrong due to this fact. This is why Shakti Parinam, according to Bhagavadāchārya, is a deeper way to perceive this reality. And then he says that this deity pervades this universe as its jiva soul, or shariri, the cosmic body's owner. If we take the unity of a body and its owner, it will be clear that Purusha has 1,000 eyes and legs, as he is the soul of all the bodies in the universe, with their heads, eyes, and legs. But this is kind of a traditional already discourse of Ramanujacharya, who would say the same thing in his commentaries. But another point important for Bhagavadāchārya is, like I mentioned before, that he tried not only to state, to reestablish Vishishtadvaita as a living tradition. That's important. The problem is that Vishishtadvaita, unlike Advaita, is not a developing tradition. I think that the last, maybe Ruzanaji can correct me, but because I'm not aware, I think that the last scholars who tried to introduce something new in Vishishtadvaita were Vedanta Deshika and Pele Lokacharya, right? So there was no development after that, unlike in the Shankarian tradition, where Madhusudana Saraswati introduced something new, and up to the 20th, even Neo-Vedanta is purely Advaitic. We can say it's primitive or popularizing, but in any case, this is kind of development of Advaita, and there's no such development in Vishishta Advaita. So Bhagavadāchārya tried to popularize it and to compete with Advaita. So this is why for him, another important point was to prove the reality of this world, unlike Shankaracharya and even Neo-Vedanta, because Neo-Vedantins were also kind of targeting Bhagavadāchārya and Vishishtadvaitins for re-establishing philosophy, which they believed to be inferior. Not only Neo-Advaitins, by the way, because the famous Swami Karpatriji, he was one of the main opponents of Bhagavadāchārya, and they even had kind of fights at Kumbh Mela when they mutually insulted each other due to some philosophical dispute, Shastrartha. So it was important for him to prove the reality of this world. But honestly speaking, for a Westerner, it sounds rather cute that people are fighting whether the world is real or unreal, because this is not a fight for money or fame or anything. This is like a fight, a real fight for philosophical question and issue. So while commenting on the second and third mantras of Puruṣasūktam, he says the second mantra describes capabilities, samartha, of the supreme ruler who possesses all powers, and his powers and qualities are not figurative descriptions or speculations of mind. The supreme ruler indeed protects the three worlds residing at his feet. He is also defender of our universe, which has real existence. And then there's a proof why it has real existence. His description is all-pervading, implies that there is a certain substance which can be pervaded by him, and it should be equally real. So if the universe is not real, there's nothing to pervade, basically. It means this shlokas proving that, or saying that Bhagavan is, or Brahman is all-pervading, they are false. Basically, they are false, but Shruti cannot be false. This is the argument of Bhagavadāchārya. And if the world were not real, it wouldn't be possible, it wouldn't have been possible to pervade it. And speaking about the transcendental sphere, as it is invisible, that being that pervades is also invisible. Its form is deprived of the upadhis, described here above, immortal and not bound by relations between the pervading and the pervaded. This is true Svarupa of Brahman, that resides in limitless divine land, Divya Pradesha, but also enthroned in hearts of great personalities possessing pure mind. And another position of Bhagavadāchārya is rather theological, but it seems to me quite interesting. So he would try to prove that for atheists, for Nastikas, Bhagavan is really non-existent. It's not that they cannot see it, but he's not non-existent, because for them there is the all-pervading consciousness, just like Virat Rupa, but in them the Antaryamin is, according to Ramanujacharya, there are 5 aspects of Brahman, as we know. It is Para, Vyuha, then Vibhav, Antaryamin, and Archa, the idol. So Antaryamin is literally not a person in hearts of those who are Nastic, and only when they start calling on Antaryamin, then it starts manifesting personal features. So when an atheist, according to Bhagavadāchārya, says that there is no God, it is true, because for him, he's not manifesting, he's manifesting only for the devotees. And then commenting on the 4th and 5th mantra, he would say that the supreme ruler is obviously present in the entire universe in his all-pervading form, Vyapaka Swarupa, along with all its attributes, Upadhis. His immortal form, which eliminates all scenes, only manifest in hearts of his devotees, not otherwise. It means that the rest of people, they just follow the laws of nature, but they do not perceive the Bhagavan. And the last important point to mention here is that further on, he would speak on such an important point as in the 20th century among the Advaitins, including the Neo-Advaitins and classical Advaitins like Karpatriji, an idea was popular that all the three Vedantas can be harmonized, that is Dvaita, Vishishta-Dvaita, and Advaita can be harmonized as a ladder with steps higher and higher. Like first we get to know that there is Brahman, but we feel the difference, this is Madhva, then we feel the unity in diversity, this is Ramanuja or Ramananda in our case, and finally we attain the perfect unity. But not like that, says Bhagavadāchārya, simply due to the fact that the concept of consciousness is radically different in the two philosophies. As for Shankaracharya, it's a field philosophy according to him. So Brahman is a kind of kshetra, like a field or like a magnetic field, for example. And its waves are actually temporary waves. They are manifesting as individual beings. And then in Vishishta-Dvaita Vedanta, it's not like that, because for Vishishta-Dvaitins, the soul is atomic, and so it means that it's a smaller particle, and it's objectively a smaller particle, like the sand particle, for example, and it can never ever be united with anything supreme. It's like the we can imagine a beach which is full of sand particles, and from a distance it seems to be one, but if we approach each particle of sand, then we see that the difference is always there. And even more, says Bhagavadāchārya, this world, according to Bhagavadgītā, is the reflection, like the Bimba and Pratibimba concept, which is later, of course, than the Gita, but still is a reflection of Brahman one way or another in all the Vedanta, we can say. So the reflection can be corrupted, but it cannot, it has the similar features with the original. And in this world, there's no such thing as absolute unity. It simply does not exist. And Advaitins often speak about a sheet of paper, like white sheet of paper. But if we take a microscope, we see that it also consists of Anu. It is called Anu. So the Anutva of the Jiva is the main point here, and Anutva can never be set aside, thrown away, simply because this is the nature of consciousness and not a certain fluctuation of this Supreme Brahman, as Shankaracharya would teach. So they cannot be reconciled. This is why Bhagavadāchārya, which was not popular in 20th century Hinduism in general, he was a strict Vishishta-Advaitin. Unlike those who are into dialogue with Advaita and other schools, he was just strict because simply he believed they cannot be reconciled. Either Advaita is true or Vishishta-Advaita is true, and one of them should be false. So this is the brief introduction into his legacy and life. I'm finishing my speech as my time finished. I just want to say that my first effort in spreading, not spreading, but translating Bhagavadāchārya's works has already been done. I included his part of his diary, so it's not a philosophical work, but part of his diary into my latest Russian book, which is called Pushpatika. Basically, it's a collection of Bhakti poetry from Middle Ages and some philosophical treatises. And the feature here is that this is the first, not only Russian, but the first non-Indian translation of most of the works that I included there, including Bhagavadāchārya. And from Awadhi, mostly Bhojpuri and Hindi, but some excerpts from Sanskrit as well. Well, I was introduced to the ambassador of India. In the middle picture, some acharyas in Ayodhya. So if anyone has questions, wants to get in touch, here are my contacts. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for such an energetic and elucidating speech. And any questions or perhaps remarks?
Yes, very good. But just I would like to ask, why you have chosen Puruṣasūktam for the
Basically, I'm only in the very beginning of the process of studying Bhagavadāchārya myself, because these books and works I excavated myself recently, just a couple of years ago. And the diary, I started with the easiest thing, which is the diary, just to insert it into the Russian book. Then I went on to study the book called Bhagavadgītā Tattva Vimarsha, and I spoke about that at some other conference. And now it's just the turn of Puruṣasūktam, because I plan to steadily study his different works and to get the general picture of his teaching. So my aim now is first to study the sources. I'm at the stage of source study. But still, I don't want to put it somewhere aside, and I want to introduce it step by step as I'm approaching this, because I believe Bhagavadāchārya deserves to be noticed as he's a really a great philosopher and theologian and a guru, you can say, and he did a lot to establish the Vishishtadvaita in the 20th century, but unfortunately he's unnoticed. Like, people still go back only to the Middle Ages, and modern philosophers just nobody's interested in them in the scholarship. And speaking about the religious followers, they probably are not interested that much in philosophy as a phenomenon. So
and you have shown that in picture that Bhakti, each other, something like that.
This one?
Bhakti,
Well, this is exactly, you can see the library here, and you can see the condition of books. They are literally, this is in the Bhagavadāchārya Smarak Bhavan in Ayodhya. Yeah, and the condition is terrible. So I brought some books with me, but others I tried to scan, and they're literally decaying. You just open it and it's getting destroyed. So I know that there's another Pustakalaya of Bhagavadāchārya in Ahmedabad, and some Indian friends went there to investigate, because there are a few Indian enthusiasts, and mostly not scholars, but rather students, and they tried to get something, but still nobody got more than we already have. So they're copies of the same books.
Yeah. Yes.
And one question. The first one, so Puruṣasūktam is very important for Vishishtadvaita. And so I made some investigation about how we can
Follow.
this and distinguish from simplify himself and the second the German and the world and so the original movement, etc., etc. So how this image influence on the philosophical system of Vishishtadvaita. And it's very interesting that Masahir Sutta, it is the base of Advaita. Here in the Brahman has supplied who knows about this power or this power this stuff. And Puruṣasūktam is the philosophical pattern of concept of relationship with God and self and the world and eyes. And it's if we don't have if you about that probably and then I thought
In Ramanujas or Ramanandis? Ramanandis. Well, no, Papan.
One of the very
Well, normally this Puruṣasūktam and some other Vedic hymns, they're chanted during the yagya in every Ramanandi ashram, but not during the Pancha Samskara. I think that for Pancha Samskara, actually there is a difference between Pancha Samskaras received by Pandits and by ordinary people in Ramananda Sampradaya. So we still follow. And the difference is that Pandits, they would get some special Gayatri mantras, not only the main Brahma Gayatri mantra, but they will get some other Gayatri mantras, unlike lay devotees. But Puruṣasūkta is a yajna hymn or Ramanandis, I think. But maybe in some subsects that would be interesting to trace, of course.
So there is some criteria in this position inside the Śvetāśvatara. It doesn't matter who is the teacher and who is I think that talk about Vedāntic and gave you idea that the tools that mirror of more social and political and cultural realities. I think that these psychological and very interesting issues are talking about. Probably it should be accompanied or added some social challenges in Christianity or political or something, because if we take Ramanujara, he was writing about that, and he had some concrete not resolved. This philosophy was has some functional,
Yeah.
And probably there is, I suppose.
Yes, you're right.
The challenges and probably also must be included and interesting how he relies on his social channel.
Yes, you are right, but the thing is that it's for Bhagavadāchārya is not a purely philosophical aspect of the hymn. Basically, he clearly divides his philosophical works and his theological, you can say, popularizing and social works, and in his other writings, which are more written in a more popular language than philosophical commentary. Of course, he would refer to the topic which has been popular in 20th century India, like how we regard the Varna system as it reflected in Puruṣasūktam, as mostly we know that Pandits are the mouth of the Purusha and the feet are Shudras are the feet. So in the 20th century, it was popular to say, but first we touch the feet of the Lord when we enter the temple. So and then another thing is that the whole body of Bhagavan is Shuddha, the Shuddha Sattva. So the whole body, even the feet, are as pure as the mouth, and they are cooperating and not arguing. The thing is that Bhagavadāchārya was trying to do the same, and he would write about the same in the same way, but it's not an achievement personally of Bhagavadāchārya, like some other things. It's just a general trend of social teachings, popular among Vaishnavas, at least in the 20th century. And not only in the 20th century, I think, and this is just my supposition, that Vaishnavas of the 19th century were, at the end of the 19th century, were even more liberal in this respect than the 20th century one. Because at that time, there were hopes for, you can say, a quick evolution of the caste system, but which did not happen, actually. Such a quick evolution did not happen. And I know that by the end of the 19th century, some Ramanandis would also offer pavita to Shudras becoming members, because they would say that Vaishnava is beyond the Varna system. When a person becomes a Vaishnava, it goes beyond. But the practical aspect is complicated because a Shudra would not send, I mean, a common person, not just a Shudra, it sounds maybe a bit rude, but a common person would not send his son to Gurukul at the age of 7 to study the Vedas. And as a result, the origin also plays its role simply because of the social background. And if we try to cut the tree of the Varna system at once, then we will simply lose Pandits and we will lose the Vedas as a manifested divine word. So this is why Bhagavadāchārya finally was not so liberal by the end of the day, despite saying that feet are also as pure as the mouth, but it doesn't mean that the mouth should become feet. That's what he would say.
So my idea was after that, every field was knowledge quite very many modern philosophical concepts. They are they has supply chain for most. But I suppose that in Indian traditional Vaishnavism, survival Vaishnava tradition, there must be also some classical distinction when it was just fundamental position. After that, they must be when people probably criticize or something like that, and they investigate or open or when you bring some concrete details, and that is their crucial point, the PowerPoint of their system. Not that they don't create something like Ramanuja system or like that, but some other style.
Well, I would say that Bhagavadāchārya is in this context is a neoclassicism. Because he had other challenges with Ramanuja Sampradaya as well, because Ramanujas were accusing him of fabricating the bhashyas that exactly were not created during the classical period. But then he would say that there's no such thing in the scriptures, that the bhashya cannot be written right now. The same thing Bhagavadāchārya would say, because why not now? So this is the time to give the tradition an adequate classical commentary, plus he would popularize it in a popular way. Why not? A modern philosopher can be there, not just a classical philosopher. We can be philosophers too. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not fabrication. I would say they accuse him of fabrication, and in fact, this is the creation itself or emanation itself, srishti.
Varna should not be translated as every time caste. It is different.
Jati. Yeah, in this case, this is why I differentiated Varna and Jati. Yes. But still, Varna-wise, we would say that the mouth cannot become feet and feet cannot become mouth, just practically. Yeah.
Of the same verse. That's why even
that Jati also has a different context.
Yeah, obviously. Jati pati puche na koi hari ko bajai, so hari ka hoy. But this is on the level of bhakti, of course. But हमारे पास ज़्यादा समय नहीं है तो
That's one more query. How do you think that because in Vedic tradition, there are so many duties.
Yeah.
But the Purusha or Virata, that was in 10th mandala, the last part of the Vedic tradition.
Yeah.
And in later tradition, so for example, in Mahabharata and Ramayana tradition, we have a concept called Puruṣottama. So do you think that the Purusha and Puruṣottama is one and the same?
Well, it's not about what I think, honestly speaking, because different Bhashyakar would answer differently as if we refer to Madhvacharya. So in his Bhashya, everything is upside down, because for him, there's the Adi Purusha is a Puruṣottama, the Vishnu, but the sacrificed Purusha is actually Shiva. And he's sacrificed not by Vishnu but by Brahma. So this is already the third tier, you can say, of the deities, of the third level of the Purusha. So it depends on the school, and I don't know if I have a right to give my own opinion. But obviously the roots are the same, and the rest depends on Bhashyakar. Of course, for Sri Vaishnavas, that would be practically the same, just a manifestation of Puruṣottama as Purusha is Vishnu, but not for Madhvacharya.
So, thank you all participants for this vivid discussion. Yes. And thank you, Maxim. And now we have to proceed to the next report, which will be done by Dr. Sanjay Kumar, School of Religious Studies, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And the title is on the term yoga in the Yogasūtras and in the Bhagavadgītā. Dr. Sanjay Kumar, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's almost midnight here in Canada, where I am. So I will begin. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And I had been wondering for this subject for a while. I have some Sanskrit quotes in there, but I will skip them and I would rather summarize them in English just for better understanding. So the paper that I have written, I became curious about this topic because Vachaspati Mishra, a major philosopher from the 9th or the 10th century, he wrote a commentary on Vyasa's commentary on Patanjali's Yogasūtras. And the very first sentence in Vyasa's commentary occurs, Yoga Samadhi, that yoga is Samadhi. When Vachaspati Mishra glosses on it, he says that this indicates that the term yoga is derived from Yuja Samadho, a Panini's verb, and not from Yujir Yoge. So the first one directly indicates, implies Samadhi meaning, but the second one implies a combination or a union of two or more components. Can I be heard?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you. So, I would like to begin this. The term yoga is derived from the Sanskrit verb yuj, which means to engage in deep contemplation, which would be samadhi, and to unite, yoge. But the examples of its usage in Sanskrit show a variety of meanings. It has been used both in philosophical and non-philosophical senses. In the non-philosophical context, it is perhaps most frequently used in the sense of mixing different components and carrying out a task with such proficiency that the action would most likely result in success. For example, when I traveled in many parts of India looking for unpublished manuscripts on yoga philosophy, especially on Patanjali's Yogasūtras, I chanced on a manuscript titled Yoga Shatakam. I must admit that my excitement of possibly having found a yogic text quickly turned into a mouth-watering desire to have a delicious, authentic Indian meal. The manuscript, titled A Collection of 100 Yogas, was a Sanskrit book which contained 100 recipes of India's traditional meals. In Ayurveda, India's traditional medical science, yoga often denotes a blend of herbal ingredients as well as their application as a treatment. The word was further used in political and military sciences too. There it meant proper implementation of a well-thought-out policy and an effective deployment of armies. Please allow me to first explore the meanings of the term yoga in the Bhagavadgītā. For no other text offers as many diverse definitions and applications of yoga as does this single text. A work of practical applications of philosophy, psychology, and spirituality, it compacts almost all applications of the term yoga. The above-mentioned non-philosophical usages of the term yoga can be best explained with the help of two definitions of yoga propounded in the Gita. When Arjuna, the most competent archer of his time, sees his dear relatives, respectable teachers, and friends standing face to face in the final battle of the Mahabharata, a profound sense of pity overcomes him. He would rather beg for food in the streets than consume fine cuisine stained with smears of blood of his dear ones. For Krishna, an incarnation of God, Vishnu and Arjuna's charioteer in the battlefield, Arjuna's sense of right and wrong is undermined by his irrational emotional reaction. So Krishna takes on the task of convincing Arjuna to shed his dejection and to go to war with the best attitude. This best attitude may be called yoga. Krishna says to Arjuna, Samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga is equilibrium, or the state of remaining serene in moments of success and failure. And yoga karmasu kaushalam, skillfulness in action, is yoga. These definitions occur in a context that expounds the importance of carrying out actions without getting overwrought about success and failure. In a practical sense, Krishna simply enjoins Arjuna to stop being a control freak. Arjuna can control his own actions alone and not the results thereof, because those who act with a desire for results often end up engaging in actions which can hardly be called actions. They would amount to be either akarma or vikarma. Due to their insistence on controlling the exact outcome of their actions, they either lose track of the right course of action or resort to unconscionable conduct. Therefore, if one is to act perfectly, one must cast off the attachment for success and aversion to failure. This state of equilibrium allows an individual to retain one's discerning ability and act skillfully. It is an effective psychological approach to concocting gourmet meals, preparing medications, and treating patients, implementing policies, and deploying armies. A calm and discerning mind is the first condition to perform one's obligations skillfully. The idea of blending or uniting more than one component permeates all the above-mentioned usages of the term yoga. The Gita incorporates a religious, philosophical, and spiritual interpretation of union. If Arjuna is incapable of applying the psychological approach and becoming detached from the conditions of the world, he can place his trust in Krishna, who represents the divinity. By surrendering himself, his actions, and their results to Krishna, Arjuna will unite with the divinity. The Gita gives yet another interesting definition of yoga, which stands in sharp contrast to the idea of union. Krishna says the disunion of one's union with suffering is called yoga, which is tam vidya dukkha sanyoga viyogam yoga lakshanam. This definition clearly alludes to the idea that all physical and sensory pleasures are the source of suffering, for they have a beginning and end. Attachment to such pleasures ends in suffering only. One should therefore not indulge in them. This statement is of great significance in understanding the philosophy of yoga as described by Patanjali. Patanjali compares the yoga system to medical science. Just as medical science has 4 subdivisions: disease, cause of disease, recovery, and treatment, so does yoga, the world, its cause, liberation, and the means of liberation. This fourfold division of yoga will fully resonate among those who are familiar with Buddha's notion of 4 realities, which are commonly known as the 4 noble truths. What Patanjali means by world here is relatable to the Gita's statement about the unpleasant nature of worldly pleasures. According to Patanjali, everyone wishes to secure happiness and avoid unhappiness, but no one has ever been able to accomplish these goals by engaging in sensory pleasures. All sensory pleasures are without doubt potentially excellent guides in letting one know that it is not worth chasing them endlessly, for they become stagnant and boring after repeated experiences of similar nature. But according to the Yogasūtras, it is not possible to outgrow the sensory pleasures by indulging in them. In fact, the more one indulges in them, the more innovative and resourceful one becomes in rekindling the fire of desires and in finding new ways and techniques to enjoy them. This yogic understanding of desires is perfectly aligned with Vatsyayana's theory of desires. According to Vatsyayana, and I'm referring to the author of the Kama Sutra, variety is the lifeline of desires. It reminds me of an advice which Socrates gave to a gentleman who sought his counsel whether he should get married or not. Socrates said, by all means, marry. If you get a good wife, you will be happy. If you get a bad one, you will be a philosopher. But given the disproportionately large numbers of unsatisfactory matches and divorces, it is interesting that people do not become philosophers. Rather, they look for variety and find another match. Obviously, people are more resourceful than Socrates thought. Their addiction to transient pleasures is so strong that they prefer anxiety over sobriety. Now, I would like to address the question I raised in the beginning of this essay. Could Vachaspati Mishra have misunderstood Vyasa's phrase, yoga samadhi? I think so. The meaning of the term yoga I just explored indicate that. But let us see if the verb yujir yoge, which means to unite or to combine, which applies in Patanjali's Yogasūtras as well. In the Yogasūtras, the marriage of Prakriti and Purusha is seen the cause of all troubles. The Yoga Vasishta and the Mahabharata state that two types of individuals enjoy happiness: the extraordinarily wise and the extraordinarily fool. It is the one in between who suffers. Marriage of Prakriti and Purusha signifies just that. Purusha cannot fully realize his absolute freedom and is dragged around by the elements of Prakriti. Prakriti too is not free of Purusha's demands, who believes, as the conscious partner, that he knows the best. Both Prakriti and Purusha thus live their life neither supremely wisely nor absolutely in the darkness. Is this true about people's marriages too? Perhaps, but I leave that to the listener's discretion. But this but why yoga considers the separation of both partners as the ultimate solution for everlasting happiness and joy? And this is explained by, I have a few quotes in Sanskrit, where Vyasa, both Patanjali and Vyasa explain that it is the separation between Prakriti and Purusha that is the foundation of ultimate happiness, bliss, and freedom, which is moksha, or the kaivalya, which is often referred to in the Yogasūtras. This shows that the Gita also embraces, however, as I noted earlier, that Gita mentions that the separation from the sources of unhappiness in the world is also called yoga. So the Bhagavadgītā calls it the separation from suffering. This shows that the Gita also embraces Patanjali's concept of yoga or kaivalya, that Purusha and Prakriti should become separate. But the Gita also propounds another concept of yoga, the union of Purusha, the individual soul, with the God, the universal soul. Because their union contradicts the idea of kaivalya, the complete separation of Prakriti and Purusha, it should be noted in this case that in the Gita it is not the unity of Prakriti and Purusha that is called yoga, On the contrary, it advises separation between the two. It is the union of Purusha and God that is called yoga. Can this concept of unity be found in Patanjali's Yogasūtras? I think so. Consider the concept of Ishvara Pranidhana, devotion and dedication to God. It is a means of achieving samadhi. More than that, Purusha's contact or witnessing of God is further seen as a powerful reminder to Purusha of his own true nature and form, that he too is as pure, blissful, alone, and free of Prakriti's attributes as God. On another sutra, Vyasa explains okay, so yeah, this is the summary of Vyasa's commentary, that Purusha remembers his own true nature by coming in contact with God. But nowhere is the concept of union as yoga or samadhi as clear as in the concept of samprajjata samadhi. Vyasa explains that there are 5 states of mind: restless, stupefied, distracted, and suspended. Of these 5, only distracted state does not count as samadhi. All the other 4 can result in samadhi. Vyasa further mentions that when samadhi occurs in the said 4 states, it depends on the mind's concentration. In other words, union with physical forms, subtle thoughts, blissful feelings, and I amness, which is called asmita. Here one clearly sees a union of mind with the objects of its perception, that the mind's connection with its objects of perception implies union is clear from the Sutra 141. A mind, and I quote here, a mind set on subtle elements and being engrossed in them is colored by the nature of such subtle elements, while a mind absorbed in gross elements is colored by their gross nature. Similarly, the mind occupied with the infinite variety in external the mind occupies objects, gets engrossed in such variety and becomes the reflector thereof. The same holds good in respect of the instruments of reception. For example, the organs of one's body. This falls in the scheme of samprajjata samadhi. In other words, samprajjata form of yoga. It seems then Vyasa says that yoga is samadhi. I do not think he is alluding to the etymology of the term yoga. Rather, he seems to be stating that yoga and samadhi are one and the same. It is only in the asamprajjata samadhi that the notion of kaivalya, or the separation of Purusha and Prakriti from each other, implies. It thus seems that Vachaspati Mishra's etymological explanation is inaccurate because it suffers from the avyapti dosha. It does not cover the samprajjata samadhi, which is also a yoga according to Vyasa. And in the end, I would like to thank everyone for patiently listening to me at this hour. Perhaps you guys are in the daytime there. Can you hear me? I cannot hear you.
Thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
Any questions and remarks? Let's see. Well, you're welcome. Well, it's I see a lady. Are you? I don't. Without spectacles, I can't identify your name. Who are you? Are you going to ask something? I think no. Then I have a remark. You see, or make a sign, please, if you, lady, if you want to say something, because I don't hear you. Well,
hello.
then I'll proceed.
Hello.
Well, yes, we're listening.
I just wanted to thank for very interesting report, but I'm just the next speaker, so but I don't have questions right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
So then I have a brief remark. You see, it seems to me that I agree that that Vachaspati Mishra was incorrect, but I think surely the Samprajñāta Samadhi is also yoga, as Vyasa puts it. Yoga is the common feature of all levels of chitta, and I can also say the chitta absolutely devoid of any samadhi is not chitta at all. It will be an idea. It will be a mental state of a moron, or something like that. Yes, yes. Then you see, but the Samprajñāta Samadhi, I think, is identified with the levels of dhyana. If we remind of the 8 limbs of yoga, and the Asamprajñāta Samadhi is identified with samadhi as the 8th limb of yoga. I think so. Then
It's may I? It
yes,
seems
yes.
to me because in the it's in the 3rd chapter where this term occurs. I will just pick up the Sanskrit book rather. It's harder for me to find the it's here. Okay. So in the if this would be only dhyana, if Samprajñāta Samadhi would fall only in dhyana, in that case we would run into trouble, because it says that there are 3 internal limbs in the Ashtanga Yoga, which is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And when it says samadhi, it says tadevartha matra nirbhasam, that the mind becomes occupied and reflects it's the object of its perception. So it seems to me that the term samadhi here includes both samprajñāta and asamprajñāta, and dhyana is a different category, which is not at the samadhi level.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, any more questions or remarks? No? Then we can thank you.
Thank you very much.
Then we can proceed to the next report by, let me, sorry. Welcome, Maria Pavlova, Doctor of Philosophy from the Puruṣottama.
No, not philosophy, philology.
PhD is written here. Dr.
No,
Philology.
no, I'm having PhD in Indian philology.
Well, in the RUDN-University, Moscow, Russia, with the title is The Influence of the Image of God in Śvetāśvatara Upaniṣad and the Bhagavadgītā on Religious Poetics of the Tamil Bhakti Saints. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. And in my report, I would like for the first time to share some analytical impressions as a simple Russian who can read original Tamil and Sanskrit religious texts of how the ideas of the Śvetāśvatara Upaniṣad and the Bhagavadgītā influenced the earliest Bhakti poetics in regional languages in India. The subject of my main research was the poetry, poetics of early medieval religious texts in South India, created in Tamil language. These are the texts of the Tamil saints who represented the earliest in India poetic tradition of Bhakti. I'm speaking about the devotees of God Shiva, the Nayanars in Tamil, and of God Vishnu, the Alvars. Their traditions were flourishing between the 6th and 12th centuries, and their mystic poetry was fixed in written form in the huge sacred corpuses of texts called Tirumurai and Nalaira Divyapirapandam. The main contents of the Tamil Bhakti poetry, and it concerns a number of late original Bhakti traditions as well, not only Tamil. The Tamil one is only considered to be the earliest poetic expression. So it is praise of God with very emotional feeling of personal love. God is perceived by the Nayanars and the Alvars as universal absolute, at the same time represented for them in some particular visual form, sensually perceivable, and having different visual attributes which could be described. For the Nayanars, it was God Shiva, and for the Alvars, it was God Vishnu. There is a point of view shared by some scholars of Tamil Bhakti in one way or another, and the main of them is a British researcher, Friedhelm Hardy. It was also shared by my Russian teacher, Dr. Alexander Dubiansky, and philosopher Alexander Pitigorsky, etc. So it is that full of emotions, very personal perception of God by the early Bhaktas historically goes back to ancient non-Vedic Aboriginal cults in India. For those cults, physical closeness of a deity was very important, and they were characterized by emotional expressions, dance, music, ecstasy, and erotism. And these characteristics are considered to come from the South and their so-called local component of Bhakti as religious phenomenon. But its other important issue came from northern religious cultures. Vedic heritage represented by sacred Hindu texts in Sanskrit. It is there that we find the source of perception of God as absolute, Brahman, where gradually appear the descriptions of God as some person having characteristics and attributes which could evoke personal love and devotion. On the basis of some research in Russia accomplished, for example, by Vladimir Toporov and to some extent by my teacher, Alexander Dubiansky, I shall try to briefly mention how this process could develop in general. I'm not a professional philosopher, so I would be grateful for any comments later. But very roughly speaking, and in general words, it is in Vedic texts that the idea of Brahman appears. First, at least according to Vladimir Toporov, it appears as some basis of ritual and its power, then as basis of all things in the universe and cosmic power, which led to the idea reflected in the Upanishads about Brahman as impersonal and the only one essence of the universe, its basis and primal course. At the same time, the description of Brahman, if it is possible to speak about any description in this case, it could be too abstractive, complicated for understanding, and aloof, detached, out of body for perception. It could become one of the reasons that in the Vedas and the Upanishads, we find some tendency of so-called personalization or embodiment of Brahman. There was a very interesting concept of the universal Purusha in Puruṣasūktam, which Dr. Maxim and Dr. Sanjay Kumar spoke today from various points of view, and it can be also regarded in this field. But another way of so-called personalization of Brahman is a particular figure of God with whom adepts could have personal, sensually perceivable contact. Such was the point of view shared by my teacher, Dr. Alexander Lubyansky, and my other teacher, Dr. Yaroslav Vasilkov. The idea of universal Brahman was attached to some Vedic gods, for example, Rudra, who later became Shiva, but mostly Narayana, who later became Vishnu, whose image as upper god was later developed in the epic texts and the Puranas, where he is often named as Bhagavan. The earliest ideas about personal God as universal absolute and personal love for that God more or less clearly appear in the first one is in Śvetāśvatara Upaniṣad, which has a number of shlokas, verses from the Vedic hymn Shri Rudram, which is in Taittiriya Samhita in Yajurveda 4.5 and 4.7. And the second text is Bhagavadgītā, the part of Mahabharata epic. The dating of both texts is quite debatable, so I will not speak about that. But anyway, it is earlier than the time when the Tamil and other regional poetic Bhakti traditions appeared. Śvetāśvatara Upanishad brings to us the idea of God in two representations, as all-pervading absolute, and at the same time manifested in the particular form of Rudra Shiva. Concerning him as absolute, it is said, could I share the screen to show these shlokas in Sanskrit? Is it possible?
Well, it should be possible from your side. You cannot do this.
Please, yes.
Do this.
I'm trying. Okay.
Розан, как ей расшарить код? Что я говорю?
I'm trying. 1 minute. I'm trying. Is it seen?
Yes, it can be seen.
Okay, thank you. So,
Yes, we can see that.
this is the first shloka. Sarvanana Shirogrivah Sarvabhuta Guhasheh Sarvavyapisa Bhagavantasmat Sarvagata Shivah. And we can roughly translate it as the one who is in all faces, heads, necks, the secret place. This word guha can also be translated as cave or heart. So it can be translated as the heart of all the creatures, Sarvabhuta Guhasheh, all-pervading God, Sarvavyapi Bhagavan, he is, and therefore omnipresent Shiva, Sarvagatah, this epithet, it is seen here. At the same time, shlokas of this text show that God is having some personal image of Rudra Shiva with visual iconographic attributes and anthropomorphic elements. So these are the next two shlokas are about that. The next one is Ya te Rudra Shiva Tanura Ghora Papa Kashini Taya Nastanuva Shantamaya Girishanta Bhichakashihi. It can be translated, your beneficent or gracious Shiva, image of whom Tanu or Rudra is not terrible, Aghora, does not show evil, Papa Kashini, look at us with this image, Tanuva, that brings peace, Shantamaya, or inhabitant of the mountains. And the next one, Yabhishum Girishantahaste Bibharshi Astave Shivam Giritratam Kuruma Hinsih Purusham Jagat. The arrow, Ishum, which you inhabitant of the mountains hold, Bibharshi, in your hand, Haste, to throw it, make it beneficial, Shivam. Don't harm Mahinsim, mankind and the world. And in the last verse of Śvetāśvatara Upanishad, it is the last on the screen. There we find important word para-bhakti, naming the so-called basis for God union, for union with God, for God achievement, and perception of Him, of course. It is said, Yasya deve para-bhaktir yatha deve tatha gurao. Tasyaite kathitah yarthah prakashante mahatmanaha. The spoken truths shine only for those great souls who have supreme love, this para-bhakti, for God and equal love for the Guru. Here it is said about feeling towards God as something we can call love and devotion. It is quite difficult to translate into English or Russian language the word bhakti exactly. Some scholars translate it as love, some as devotion, but there are not exactly only those meanings. It is a textological problem of translation, I would say, and some prefer not to translate para bhakti at all. The word derives anyway from Sanskrit root bhaj, that means to share, to be shared, to be involved, to praise, respect, to love. But love is very secondary meaning of this word. It is also well known that the essence of bhakti as spiritual teaching and kind of yoga, spiritual path, is first revealed in detail in the Bhagavadgītā, which is the sixth book of the epic Mahabharata. We all know this very well, which contains a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, and Krishna proclaims spiritual truths to Arjuna. And in Bhagavadgītā, Krishna reveals to Arjuna his divine essence as universal absolute by graciously giving to him the so-called divine sight and perception. I will share again some shlokas demonstrating this. Okay. Oh, no, sorry, it's not that one. Again. Yes, this one. It is said, Tatraika stham jagat kritsnam pravibhaktam anekadha apashyad devadavasya sharire pandavas tada. At that time, Pandava Arjuna, name of Arjuna, could see in the universal form of God, Devadavasya Sharire, the complete universe, Jagat Kritsna, situated in one place, although divided into many, Pravibhaktam Anekadha. Quite many shlokas contain the descriptions of God as absolute in Bhagavad-gītā. Some of them on behalf of Arjuna, some on behalf of Sanjaya. In some shlokas, Krishna himself talks about his all-pervading universal nature, mostly there in the 10th chapter. And I shall show only few examples. The next shloka is Yomam ajam anadim cha veti loka maheshwaram asamudhah samartyeshu sarva papaih pramuchyate. The one who knows me as unborn, Ajam, as the beginningless, Anadim, as the supreme God of the worlds, Loka Maheshwaram, he only undiluted among men is freed from all sins. And another shloka. Aham atma gudakesha sarva bhutasha sthitah. Aham adishcha madhyamcha bhutanam anta evacha. I am Atma, O Gudakesha, this is again the name of Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living creatures, Sarva Bhutasha Sthitah. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. Adishcha Madhyamcha Bhutanam Anta Evacha. It is said about some aspects of Absolute as well. Bhumir Apo Nalo Vayu Kham Mano Budhir Evacha. Ahankara Iti Amme Bhina Prakritir Ashtadha. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, buddhi, and ego, ahankara. All these iti, I am 8, constitute my separate material energies, prakritis. And the next one is mattah parataram nanyat kinchit ashti dhananjaya. My sarvam idam protam sutre manigana eva. There is no truth beyond me, O Dhananjaya. Everything rests upon me, my sarvam idam, as pearls are strung protam on a thread. with the descriptions of Krishna as universal absolute in Bhagavad-gītā, we see that at the same time he is a concrete person, an elder relative and chariotee and close friend of Arjuna. In the 11th chapter, Arjuna, after seeing universal form of Krishna and being overwhelmed by it, apologizes to Krishna that he previously regarded him simply only as a friend, Sakha in Sanskrit. But Krishna shows to Arjuna that nothing changes in this way, and their human relationship stay as they are. So the image of God in Bhagavad-gītā and Mahabharata epic in general is physically very close to his adepts, not only Arjuna, but other characters, Draupadi and other Pandava characters as well. The topic concerning the yoga spiritual path to the highest goal of God achievement in Bhagavad-gītā is quite complicated and debatable, be it karma marga, jnana marga, or bhakti marga. So I'm focusing only on some aspects of bhakti issue and the basis of relationship between an adept and his image of God. Krishna says that he is dear to his bhakta and bhakta is dear to him, using the word priya in Sanskrit. The adept should concentrate his thoughts and feelings on devotional love for God, so that mutual love can be considered as essence of bhakti. In Bhagavad-gītā, the word bhakti itself is used many times, which in most cases is translated, at least into Russian language, as love for the best understanding for Russian readers. For example, it was done so by Dr. Vsevolod Sergeyevich Sementsov, in whose memory this conference is. And his translation into Russian is one of the best, as well as Dr. Boris Smirnov's. But I shall focus your attention again that the Sanskrit word bhakti towards God is not exactly love and is not easy to translate in one word. Also, in a number of verses, it is said that God is within adept's heart because love concerns heart, as it is in Russian version of Bhagavad-gītā. But in original Sanskrit text, in most cases, what is translated as heart is manas, the mind. So it's a very different thing. There are so many issues in Bhagavad-gītā interesting for discussing, but focusing on my main topic, finally I shall show how the ideas and descriptions of God in Sanskrit Bhakti texts were adopted by the earliest Tamil Bhakti poets, using the material of the poetry of the Nayanars, the Devaram collection of hymns to God Shiva, which is the core of the sacred corpus Tirumurei. I'll give just few quotations from the hymns in Tamil language, showing their perception of God Shiva as universal absolute. The Tamil Poetics often puts this idea in the name of God itself, following the ancient poetics of Vedic Sanskrit hymns. I'll share one more picture. Minute. So in Tamil, Shiva is called Nana Vida Uruvan, the one who is who in many kinds of different forms. Pala Uruvan, having many forms. Nilay Yanan, the one who is universe. But it is only one version of translation. Actually, the word Nilay in Tamil can be as well translated generally as position, conditions, stability, place, nature, quality, and even religious rule. And Tamil scholars, for example, Gopal Iyer and Subramanya Iyer, translated in many words as the one who is the cause for all other things to exist till their allotted span of life, himself having no destruction. So it sounds like a commentary, not a translation of the world, of the word. It is also, the god is called Adiyavar, the one who is primal source of everything. Andamum Adiyum Ahea Annal, God who became the end and the beginning of everything. And we can notice that in some descriptions of God in Tamil, the poets use the words with Sanskrit roots, such as Adi, the beginning, the primal source, and Antam, the end. We can compare it to shloka from Bhagavadgītā. You can see it at the bottom of the picture. Aham adishcha madhyam cha bhutanam anta eva cha. At the same time, the image of God is seen by the Nayanars as having quite anthropomorphic mythological form, which was seen by them by mystical vision at particular sacred places of Tamil land. For example, this is a description of Shiva performing his cosmic dance in the place of Vedkalam. I'll share one more picture. So, okay. In Tamil, it sounds like this. Andamum adiyumahya annal vetkala nannaharar. Ar aral ange amarnde ilanga. Mandam muravam iamba. Malay mahal kana nindre adi. Sandam ilange nahutale gange. Tan madiyam ayale tadumba. Venda venire me pusum. Here is the translation, the God who is the end and beginning of all things, and who is in the good city of Vedkalam, the fire of unbearable heat to shine, being held on the palm, the Mujavo drum to be played on a low tone, having danced, standing to be witnessed by the daughter of the mountain, that means Parvati, the laughing skull having prominent holes, Gange, and the cool crescents to swing to and fro by each other's side, and he smears his form with well-burnt white ashes. The relations between God and adept in the Nayanar's mystic tradition is based on quite personal mutual love, and I shall share some examples from the Devaram hymns where love is mentioned, and it is expressed in a very simple and I would say even some primitive way. We'll see it right now. Okay, it is said about the loving people with joined hands praise God, Shiva, where people who concentrated their thoughts on God with the help of the garlands of verses live in love for God. To be worshipped by devotees with increasing love in their hearts. And the following examples are about love concerning God Shiva himself, regarded in this, I would say, emotional way. He loves those who worship him with joined hands, that God is one who dwells with love in the great hill of Kargudi. So, as it is seen in general, the image and perception and ideas of God in the tradition of the Tamil Bhakti saints has much in common with Sanskrit texts on the level of main ideas and expressions. I would say some main ideas. But at the same time, there is some difference as well. For example, there is one peculiar moment concerning Sanskrit words Bhakti and Bhaktas in the sacred corpus of the Nayanars. At least I can say this about Tirumurai and Devaram, the texts. In the descriptions of God as universal absolute in Tamil language, we can find the words with Sanskrit roots quite often. I would say they are the same Sanskrit words, a little bit differently pronounced. So we can speak about some influence of the Sanskrit texts on the Tamil texts at this point. But there is one interesting textological difference between Sanskrit and Tamil Bhakti texts, which I have noticed clearly. The Śvetāśvatara Upaniṣad and especially Bhagavadgītā use many times the word Bhakti to convey the meaning devotional love for God, spiritual love, love as yoga and discipline, at least when to understand it in this way. In Tamil language, there is the word for bhakti derived from the same Sanskrit root. It sounds patti, but it is the same. And there is the word pattar, which means bhaktas, bhakta. But the Tamil mystic poets, for some reason, generally avoided using this word in their hymns. For devotional love for God, they used original Tamil words with the meaning love. As you could see in previous examples on the picture, there were two words, Tamil words, kadal and anbu, which in Tamil usually define the love that can be not spiritual at all, but emotional, physical, and sensual. And this is the one of interesting textological issues concerning the difference between Bhakti Yoga of Bhagavadgītā and mystical divine experience of the Tamil Bhakti saints. So it can be generally said on the textological level at least that the image of God in Bhagavad-Gītā creates deep spiritual love. Some call it intellectual as yoga and discipline. And in Tamil Bhakti texts, the image of God evokes sensual emotion love as well. For example, in some verses of the saint Sundarar, it even becomes passion in expression. And this is very generally speaking. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Okay.
Thank you so much. Any remarks, questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Come here. But otherwise, we won't hear me. But we don't have the count. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Yes, I have a question and a remark actually. First, I'll ask a question, and then I'll give my remark just to make it clear why I'm asking this question. You mentioned that the fact that Antaryamin resides in the heart, right? It's not a proof that it's about that bhakti is love, as mostly heart is associated with manas.
Manas. In Tamil, it is manam. Manam.
Yeah, let me finish. I'll ask an extended question. Yeah, so actually the question is short, but the remark will be more extended. So the question is, in this case, where does love reside? According to, let's say, literature of the Bhagavad-Gītā period, because honestly speaking, I don't know myself. So if it's about maybe love also resides in man. Though I perfectly agree that bhakti is not love in modern sense of the word, and especially in the sense of the word as we use it in English or Russian or European languages, and has different roots and all. But the problem here is that we mostly perceive Bhagavad-Gītā through the spectacles of medieval commentaries, and on the level of Vaishnava Bhakti, at least in the Middle Ages, there's an idea of Rasik Bhakti, which can be more or less, which approaches more or less close to the idea of love. Still, I don't believe that ras is love from the English or Russian perspective, because when you say ras, it's rather a kind of a different thing, like as a sentiment, juice, something like some particular thing. So what I mean is that when a Christian says that I love God, or you have to love God, he obviously doesn't mean Madhurya Bhav, despite the fact of the Spanish mystics tradition. But still, this is kind of the different thing. So it's impossible to translate the word, I agree. But yeah, the question is, where does love reside if we set apart the spectacles of the medieval Rasik Bhakti tradition? Because in Rasik Bhakti tradition, obviously it resides also in the heart, and it's just a deeper level of the heart than the mind is, than the man is. It's just like a matryoshka, like you know guys what matryoshka is. It's a Russian doll, and inside there's one more doll, and inside there's another doll. So the deeper you go, the smaller the doll is. So this is a matryoshka principle. First, in your heart you have this man, then you have buddhi, then you have deeper level, which is already the level of antaryamin, and here we can speak about Rasik Bhakti in terms of the medieval Rasik Bhakti. What about the Bhagavad-Gītā times? Thank you. Where love resides.
I can speak about Tamil mystic poetry mostly because I'm having research on this material. Okay, I mean my prior subject of research was not Bhagavadgītā, but I can answer you about Tamil tradition. Okay. So they use for the place where love resides, this Bhakti, yes, which is unbound cuddle in Tamil. In many times, I read this word manam, which I personally translated, and my teacher translated as heart. But it is manas, it is not. But for Russian readers to understand better, we translate it as heart. But also in Tamil religious hymns, the saints use the word ullam. Ullam is very general Tamil word, which means exactly something interior. But which interior? Something which is inside. And they also put anbu and kadal, this bhakti, into the ullam. And we mostly translate this ullam not as heart, but as soul in Russian.
Yeah, but
yes, it may be not translated like that in one word, but it is also a textological problem.
Yeah, obviously. Thank you. That's but well, that's what actually I'm saying, because in Vishishtadvaitin tradition, still Antaryamin resides in the heart, or at least in the area of the heart, which is Divya Pradesh in Hindi tradition of the Middle Ages. And it seems that there's a full correspondence. So love also resides there, along with the man, or it resides in the same sphere, but in the same place, you can say, but in a deeper sphere, in a sense, probably. But
yes,
I don't know,
and I would like also to add that for the Russian person, to translate it as manam as mind, it would be the different thing.
Yeah, yes, of course. We understand this because we are scholars of Indian philosophy and culture.
Yeah.
So we more or less understand. But for a common Russian, I agree that it's impossible to translate these terms at all. And we always can be criticized for whatever option we choose. So that's normal. Thank you.
In the Bhagavad-Gītā too, it says that actually the God resides in the heart and not in the mind. And at some point, actually, it makes a distinction between manas and the heart. It says that sanyamya sarvanik mano hridi nirudhyacha, having mind concentrated in the heart itself. So there is a distinction between mind and heart in the Bhagavad-Gītā as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for listening.
Whether when I attentively see something or attentively hear something, the manas resides either in either somewhere in the ear or in the eye and so on. But as to love, there is nasty Sanjay.
Basically, manas
it is derived from man, which means to think. So basically, it was more flow and it was closer to Buddhi.
Yes, you see, the first manas was discussed by the god Yama in the Upanishad, and manas is compared to Rashmi.
Maria, can you appear again, because we're discussing still your quote? I'm sorry.
Rashmi, and it is in European terms, it is the very indifference of mind and attention. And Rashmi can be influenced either by Indriya, so the forces, or by Saratthi, that is Buddhi. So the European distribution of faculties doesn't focus on this unity of attention and mind. That's why manas is untranslatable, both in Russian, in English, and in European languages. And sometimes I translate it, well, it is quite accurate as to sense, but very inappropriate stylistically as commutator, as in telephone station. Thank you. So, well, the discussion took place and seems to have exhausted. Thank you very much, Maria, for your report. And now we proceed to the last author in our session. It is Ivan Tolchernikov from Lomonosov State University in Moscow. The report is entitled The Yoga System in Shankara's Commentary on the Bhagavadgītā. Do you hear us?
Good afternoon.
You are
Do you hear me well?
Yes, yes, we do.
I have a small presentation, so could you please give me rights to show my screen? Oh, I can do that.
Try.
Yeah, it
yes,
works. It
yes,
works.
okay.
We can see
It's
that.
It works. I would like to quickly introduce myself. I'm a student from Moscow State University, the Department of Philosophy, and today I would like to share with you the results of my last annual research, and I'm going to talk about the practical philosophy of Adi Shankaracharya, that is concentrated in his Bhashya on the most practical oriented text in the threefold basis of the Vedanta philosophy, so the Bhagavadgītā. And since it is a Bhashya, a commentary work, there is no consistency in presentation of the considered subjects. So all the statements on a subject, for example, on the practical philosophy, are made ad hoc when the commented texts give such opportunity, and my work consists of assembling those scattered statements into a consistent text. And first of all, let's take a bird's eye view of the Bhagavad-Gītā. Traditionally, the method of spiritual practices of spiritual ascending to the highest good, what is called yoga in the broad sense, was considered to be the subject of Gita, and also traditionally this method was divided into three: Karma Yoga, the method of action; Jnana Yoga, the method of knowledge; and the Bhakti Yoga, the method of devotion. But this division seems historically accurate only since the Bhakti movement conjoined with Vedanta philosophy, therefore nearly since Ramanuja. And before that, before Ramanuja, two main parties were arguing in the field of a practical philosophy of Hindu religion. The Mimamsakas, who adheres to the path of Karma Yoga, and the Advaita Vedantins, who stands for the primacy of Jnana Yoga. So we should not be surprised that Shankara does not consider the Bhakti Yoga as important and independent path. Thus, he views the subject of Gita as twofold: Karma Yoga on the one hand and Jnana Yoga on the other. And that fundamental yogas, Shankara, and that two fundamental yogas, Shankara relates to the two types of men described him in the commentary on the verse 3.3. So he characterizes both yogas by the word nishtha, that could be translated as the path, the focus of a practice, or the intentionality of some practice. And then he tells that nishtha in Jnana Yoga is for people whom he calls the Samkhyas. They are obviously not the successors of Kapila, and Shankara characterizes them thus. At first, they are Atma, Anatma, Vishaya, Viveka, Vijnanava, or those who with their discrimination ability, Vijnana, has divided the spheres of Atman and of not Atman. Second, they are Samyasins, those who renunciated engagement in every kind of action. Third, they are guided by Vedanta, by the Upanishads and philosophical reflection upon them. Third, they are and the last and the most important point, they are Brahmani Avasthita, those who has abided in Brahman, therefore those who has converged into Brahman, what according to Advaita is equal of attaining moksha. And Nishtha, the intention of the other fundamental yoga, the Karma Yoga, is for people called by Shankara the yogins, who as well is not the successors of Patanjali, but just karmins, those who engage in action. Thus, the main difference between the Samkhyas and the yogins, between those who has attained moksha and those who has not, is engagement in activity. Therefore, we could point that Jnana Yoga is not an activity. As Shankara states in the commentary on the verse 239, the Samkhyas intends on Samkhya, which is the buddhi, or the understanding of Paramartha, the higher truth. So Jnana Yoga is nothing else but an extraordinary condition of a soul, the understanding, the condition of understanding. And in the commentary on the same verse, Shankara also states that the yogins intends on yoga, in other words, on engagement in the specific actions, of which Shankara gives here 3 examples. The devotion to Ishvara, that may be considered as Bhakti Yoga, the Karma Yoga, and the Samadhi Yoga, the practice of concentration. Now we should establish the relations between two Shankara's fundamental yogas spoken before and the other yogas, for example, Bhakti or Samadhi. And let me make an assumption, supposing that the Bhagavadgītā speaks of yogas mentioned in the titles of its chapters. Among 18 of them, there are 8 containing the word yoga in a sense of method, from the 2nd to the 8th and the 12th. It would be some ridiculous thing to consider, for example, Arjuna's grief as the method, the yogic method. What presented is the title in the title of his first chapter, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And therefore, let's suppose that Shankara needed to organize in a system the following yogas: the Samkhya Yoga, or the method of reasoning, the Karma Yoga, the Jnana Yoga, the Samyasa Yoga, or the Yoga of renunciation, the Dhyana Yoga, the Yoga of concentration, and let's consider it is identical with Samadhi Yoga, the Vijnana yoga, or the yoga of discrimination, the spheres of experience, and the Abhyasa yoga, the yoga of meditative repetition, and finally the Bhakti yoga. And in this point, I suggest that there are two senses in which Shankara speaks about the Karma yoga. First, it is the intentionality for the yogins, that is, all the living beings who live a religious or spiritual life and engaged in action. Therefore, let's speak of the Karma yoga, one of the two fundamental yogas, as the Karma yoga in a broad sense. This term includes every yoga which involves action. The Karma yoga in the second sense is that spoken in the commentary on 239 among the Bhakti and the Samadhi yoga. And let's speak of that as the Karma yoga in a narrow sense. It is related to the specific sense of the word karman, the religious rite, and namely the Vedic rite. The next steps is to distribute 8 above-mentioned yogas between 2 fundamental yogas according to the criterion of involving action. All of them involving it are included into Karma yoga in a broad sense, all others in Jnana yoga. 3 of them have already been attributed to the Karma yoga by Shankara. First, it is Bhakti yoga, including a devotee, an act of devotion, and a devoted god. Second, it is the Karma yoga in a narrow sense, including a man preparing the rite, some ritual activity, and a beneficiary of the rite. And last, the Samadhi yoga, or the Dhyana yoga, that is, according to the commentary on the verse 13:24, the practice of withdrawing the senses from the manas away from their objects, and respectively withdrawing manas into the pratyak cetaiter, or the inner intellect. Thus, all 3 are actions, since they contain a subject, an object, and an instrument. Further, the Samkhya yoga should be properly attributed. In the commentary on the same verse, 13:24, Shankara defines Samkhya as Chintana, the reasoning or the theoretical activity, and gives us the following example. There are 3 gunas and Atman. The witness of the activity is eternal and distinct from them. So Samkhya yoga, rather counterintuitively, must be attributed to the Karma yoga in a broad sense. So it is a practice for the yogins, but not for the Samkhyas. Then Abhyasa yoga is characterized by Shankara in the commentary on the verse 8:8. The Abhyasa yoga is a repetition of the thought intentioned on the me, as Krishna says, not interrupted by any other thought. And me might be considered as Ishvara or Atman, since in the Advaita Vedanta they're identical from the standpoint of higher trust. And the purpose of such repetition, Shankara established in one of his minor works, Brahma Anuchintanam, for those who can not live and think as they are the Brahman. It is beneficial just to concentrate on the thought, I am Brahman. Therefore, again, the Abhyasa yoga implies activity and is intended to those who has not yet attained moksha. So it should be attributed to the Karma yoga in a broad sense. Then it is worth noting that how Shankara established relation between Jnana and Vijnana. The knowledge and the discriminationability. In verse 9:1, Krishna says that he will open the great secret about Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam, knowledge combined with discrimination, and Shankara paraphrases it as Anubhava Yuktam, the knowledge combined with the immediate experience. Returning to the commentary on the verse 3:3, we can state that this experience is related to the discrimination of Atman, the eternal witness of other things, non-eternal and engaged in activity, and all these things. And for this has a subject, an object that is all experience, and instrument that is anubhava, the immediate perception, immediate experience. We should accept that the Vijnana yoga implies activity. Therefore, it should be attributed to the karma yoga in a broad sense. Also, but the result of successful Vijnana yoga, the act of Vijnana, is realization that I am Atman who does not engage in activity, including the karma yoga. So the successful Vijnana yoga could be performed only once and might be considered as method of transgression from the state of yogin engaged in activity to the state of samkhya, who has attained moksha. In other words, the method of transgression from the karma yoga in a broad sense to the jnana yoga. And all above mentioned may be applied to the sannyasa yoga, the yoga of renunciation. There are a huge amount of different phenomena of which this word is spoken. But now let's focus on a peculiar sense of this word. In Advaita Vedanta, a person might attain moksha only through the knowledge of the non-dual Atman. Every activity, as it's stated above, implies a subject and an object, therefore more than one thing. Consequently, the nature of activity is opposed to the nature of knowledge and belongs to the sphere of nescience. As a result, to attain moksha, one should renounce every activity, and to this phenomena, Shankara refers as true samyasa. So, the samyasa yoga also could be performed successfully only once, and it is a method of transgression from the state of yogin to the state of samkhya. In fact, the Vijnana yoga and the sannyasa yoga seem to be the same process, by the former exposes its aspect of understanding the reality, and the latter exposes its aspect of self-identification with the subject of activity or with the mere witness of it, the Atman. But here Shankara faced the problem with the duties of karma. As you might know, all the karma fruits to be partaken are divided in two groups, the present and the future karma. All future karma could be burned in its seeds by cultivating vairagya, the equanimity against all pleasure and pain. And all the present karma has to be partaken, included prarabdha karma, the karma of the present incarnation and its circumstances and duties. So, according to the Vedic injunctions, all the samyasins, the elderly brahmanas, could renounce, without committing sin, the duties of their caste included in the prarabdha karma. Therefore, attaining moksha is possible only for them, for elderly brahmanas. This is the argumentation given by Mimamsakas. And to refute it, Shankara suggests to examine the problem considering two levels of trust: Vyavahara, the empirical statements, and Paramartha, the statements about absolute reality. From the standpoint of the empirical world, we are always engaged in some activity, since even if we are not doing something, we choose to not do it, and this choice always has consequences. On the contrary, from the standpoint of the absolute reality, there is no beings except Brahman, who does not act at all, since there are no objects for its activity. And Shankara redefines the term samyasa. It was used in the sense of changing the way of life accessible to the elderly Brahmanas, but he used it in the sense of changing the way of thought, occurring in transgression from the level of empirical truth to the inactive absolute, inactive Brahman. But this change does not necessarily imply the change in the style of life. The body and the antahkarana of such men of renouncing still perform their duties according to prarabdha karma. This person, liberated in thought but still having a body, is called by Shankara the Jivan Mukta, the living liberated, and he continues to do all his duties for the sake of all living beings, for the sake of all world. And last, I should tell about Jnana Yoga. In the introduction to the commentary on the 4th chapter, Shankara defines it thus. It is a yoga characterized by Jnana Nishtha, by the intentionality to the knowledge of the Atman, and by sannyasa. It is a yoga that accumulates all goodness of Veda, and finally it is a yoga for which the karma yoga in a broad sense serves as a preparatory stage. And now we have a complete structure of Shankara's yoga system. At the beginning, the person is just a secular man. Then he or she makes his or her first step on the path leading to moksha. From that first step, they are the yogins for whom the karma yoga in a broad sense is intended, including reasoning as samkhya yoga, ritual activity as the karma yoga in a narrow sense, devotion to the god as bhakti yoga, practices of concentration, meditative repetition as abhyasa yoga. And when they succeeded in it, they prepared their minds, what's called chitta shuddhi, to the next stage. And the transgression to it is implemented by renunciation as sannyasa yoga and by the act of discrimination, the Atman, from the other beings, non-eternal and engaged in activity, as the successful Vijnana yoga. And after that, they are becoming the Samkhyas or the Jnana yogins. In some sources, it is stated that Jnana yoga contains of Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, the listening of the Vedic or Vedanta texts, the reflection and the meditation on them. But all of that is not the Jnana yoga itself, but only the means of receiving some information about Atman, Brahman, and our illusory world. Shankara even defines them as containing the action in his commentary on the Brihadaranyaka Upaniṣad, and the successful Jnana yoga of which Shankara speaks is not listening or reflection, but the realization that I am Brahman, eternal and inactive, and all this world of duality is a mere illusion created by nescience. Therefore, successful Jnana yoga is equal to attaining moksha, and the succeeded Jnana yogin is the Jivan Mukta, the living liberated, whose body and mind continue to act not for pleasing the ego, but for the sake of all living beings. This line of Shankara philosophy was continued by one of his closest disciples, Sureshvara, in treatise called Naishkarmya Siddhi, where he speaks primarily of the Jnana yoga and the nature of action and inactiveness. But the Mimamsakas remain to be his main opponents, along with proponents of Bheda-Bhedavada, standing for the primacy of the Karma Yoga or for the combining Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga in attaining moksha. And the argumentation against the proponents of Bhakti is the business of Advaitins who lived much later than Shankara and Sureshvara, and whose treatises are still to be introduced into scientific discourse. So it is a very, very big and open field to research the practical philosophy of the Advaita Vedanta, because in Europe, in European academical society, we always focus on the ontology or epistemology of Advaita Vedanta, what is called pure philosophy since Aristotle, but the practical philosophy, the purpose of all ontology, epistemology, that's why Shankara wrote something about it, is remain highly underrated. So thank you for your attention. I would be glad to answer your question or hear your remarks.
Thank you, Ivan, for your very systematic approach to Shankara's ideas. And it's quite elucidating. So any comments, questions, and so on?
Задайте вопрос какой-нибудь. А то я задам. Here we are. Yeah, thank you for an interesting speech. That was really very well systematic. Actually, we had the previous speech, the previous report related to the very definition of what bhakti is in Bhagavad-Gītā in general. And obviously, Shankaracharya has to take an effort to eliminate the original meaning of Gita's bhakti as a certain approach to the divine, to the Antaryamin, first of all, because the Antaryamin appears there in Bhagavad-Gītā. So I'd like to ask, what do you understand by the word bhakti in the context of your presentation? Because today we have been arguing about exactly definitions of things. So what is bhakti within the context of your presentation? This is one thing. And another thing, as we know, Shankaracharya authored a few poems that are purely of bhakti nature. It's not only the Bhaja Govindam, but so many Ashtakam and Stutis to other deities. So do you believe that they were ascribed to Shankaracharya later? Maybe he didn't author them, or how would you comment on their existence? So these two questions: the definition of yoga and the existence of bhakti poetry, bhakti stutis in Shankaracharya's legacy.
Definition of bhakti yoga or all yoga?
No, of bhakti yoga within the context of your presentation, because we clearly understood karma and jnana yoga here is, and bhakti yoga seems to be not the same bhakti yoga as we heard in the previous speech. But Shankarian definition should be different. Yeah.
Okay. For me, Shankara seems to be the intellectual raffiner that has some dislike of bhakti yoga, because yes, as you pointed, Shankara very often in his commentary on the Bhagavad-Gītā tries to make bhakti yoga less independent and less important by identification it with jnana yoga, because bhakti is a devotion to God. God is Ishvara. The Ishvara is a god of illusory world, and Ishvara equals to Brahman. So bhakti yoga is a hidden jnana yoga. Is a jnana yoga for people who are not so intelligent as Shankara. Yes, it is a jnana yoga.
What is bhakti yoga to him then? What is
bhakti yoga is a devotion to the god who is Brahman from the standpoint of the higher truth. So bhakti yoga is jnana yoga, but covered with illusion, covered with nescience.
Yeah, so no place for love, as we heard in the previous Maria's speech. the worst place for love. Yeah, but what about the poems like Bhaja Govindam? Do you believe that they were ascribed to Shankaracharya later, or probably he had some double life or whatever?
I have not the ability to speak about it because I don't know so much about Shankara's poems, the poems which ascribed to him. As I saw in the book of Natalia Isaeva, Shankara and Indian philosophy, in the context of Indian philosophy, these poems are just ascribed to him because the language of them is not the language of the commentary on Brahma Sutra. If we consider Shankara as the author of Brahma Sutra Bhashya, so it is very doubtful to consider him as the author of these poems. But I cannot give you some answer because my lack of knowledge.
Yeah, well, nobody can actually. Even Dr. Isaeva is just rather a supposition, you can say, guess. So yeah, we have one more question. A remark, yeah. Then you can come here so that the speaker would hear.
Yes, I can hear from the room and only in the microphone.
Where should I speak?
Just here.
Okay. Hello. The paper was more studied one, and some questions were put forth by the honorable member, and that's why I want to elaborate on them. The first thing that he has said that there is no place for love in the scriptures or in the songs, the bhaktis of Shankaracharya. But here there are 8 types of bhaktis, and one amongst them is Madhura Bhakti. Radha embodies the Madhura Bhakti. So love is the integral part of the devotion. It is the selfless service and devotion towards the God. And here the God is not Brahman. It is the incarnational form of the Brahman that is put to the service in the Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga is there. And one more point that he has added, that there is a gradation of the devotees that he has considered even in the Bhagavadgītā. And accordingly for the bhakti, for the one who is not that much advanced in the level of samadhi and the Jnana Yoga, that's why he has written the Bhakti Yoga. So he has given equal percentage and the weightage to all 3 forms, that is the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, not so much in and the Bhakti Yoga in his literature. The other point that we had talked about just about is the authorship of Bhaja Govindam, the Stotra literature.
Could you please speak slower? Could you speak please slower? I can't understand you. Slower.
Okay, sorry. Yes. There are many stotras which have been ascribed to Lord Shankaracharya, and there is one common thread running through all these things. So we cannot separate and segregate Bhaja Govindam separately from the authorship that is ascribed to Shankaracharya. There are internal evidences, so also external evidences. His language is very simple, very fluid, and it is the nature that I'm going to explain in my paper, that it is the nature of the text that determines the language to be employed. When he's writing for a commentary, his language has to be studied one. It is quite different. When he is writing for the shlokas and the stotras, his language has to be different because the reader of them is quite different. So the language is simple, the thoughts are simply put, and that's why these can be, traditionally it has been ascribed to Bhaja Govindam, but also by the theoretical and scholastic method also, we can show that the author of these stotras is Lord Shankaracharya himself. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, the language of Bhashyas and the language of poetic works of Shankara must be different. I gave you the point of Natalia Isaeva, but I personally I don't know so much about Shankara's poems, and I would like to know something about it. So maybe I will read your paper. It's very interesting for me, but now I can't speak about them because my lack of knowledge.
Well, actually, nobody knows, but my point was not that there's no love. You misunderstood me, kind of. It was a kind of a question because as a result, I mean, as a summary of the report we just heard, I came to the conclusion that according to Ivan, there's no place for prem. And what you're speaking about, Madhurya Bhakti, that's what we were discussing with Maria, obviously. Yes. If we look through the Gita, through the spectacles of Ramanujacharya and later, then these things appear. But the question is quite straightforward here. What did Shankaracharya himself thought about this subject matter? Shankaracharya himself. And according to Ivan, there was no place for love. So this is what we are trying to figure out.
Okay. Here I would like to add one more point, that Ramanujacharya was a product of time. He belonged to the medieval age of India, and medieval age of India is immersed with the Bhakti Yoga. It is not only in the Sanskrit text, but it is in the regional languages that many texts have come forward from. Even in the South India, in North India, Kabir, Tulsidas, all have come up with their devotional songs, and that's why Ramanuja couldn't keep it aside. That's why it got the prominence. He was the product of his age, and the people were of general nature. They were not scholars as they used to be in the ancient period, who were known having the knowledge of Sanskrit language. But the language has been simplistic. There are some people who can understand pedantic language and the common language. So most of the regional texts, if you find that half of the words are Sanskrit words, only the verbal form is the regional one, and that makes it the regional languages. We have borrowed too much vocabulary from the Sanskrit, and that's why we understand them. It is an integral part of our regional languages. So that is one more thing that we need to place into service when we are considering Ramanuja and we are placing Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya belonged to the ancient period, whereas Ramanuja is of medieval period. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your remarks.
I add a bit. You see,
Мария хочет что сказать.
Maria.
Ну, вы скажите.
I add a bit. It seems to me that sometimes the style, the functional style of the or the poem or treatise is predominant, and so we can't say that the mental individuality of such historical person as Shankara is universally depicted or or seen by us in all his different writings and poems. I can compare it with the case of the ancient Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, who composed both the treatises and the hymns to the goddess Tara. And although he was of the firm opinion that everything is Shunya, he addresses Tara as not being Shunya because it is him. And so in hymnography, in stotras, Shankara also can use different language and think and feel differently. And it's in vain that we shall guess who was Shankara for himself. Thank you.
Let's give a word to Maria, because I think she will say something about the heart and maybe not.
Maybe not. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, maybe the answer to my question was already there, but because maybe of bad sound, I could not hear everything. But my question is that what I have seen for example, in the field of modern Indian philosophy, there is a common point of view that Bhakti Marga in Bhagavadgītā is quite primitive. For example, philosopher Radha Krishnan puts it like this, that this way to unite with God just better than nothing. If you are not able to use other techniques, other margas, you can use bhakti as the most primitive and simple way to achieve God. And I think that this is a very intellectual position, of course. And what do you think? Was the Shankaracharya and the school of Advaita Vedanta were the first who gave birth to that intellectual method, intellectual point of view in the history of Indian philosophy?
Ivan, this is a question to you.
Okay. Excuse me, I forgot the name of author, but
Radha Krishnan.
Not
Radha
Krishnan.
It is better than nothing. It's very primitive yoga.
Okay. We have a book in Russian, Vedanta and Neo-Vedanta. I forgot the name of the author. Maybe you... Kostyuchenko. And he stands for that intellectual movement in Indian philosophy, begins with the authors of Upaniṣad. So there were Upanishads and there was Bhagavadgītā, for example. And Bhagavadgītā was a more emotional, bhakti-oriented style of thought, and Upanishads was the purely intellectual style of thought. And the point of Kostyuchenko is that the Advaita Vedanta, continues the tradition of Upanishad, and the Vishishta Advaita Vedanta or Dvaita Vedanta continues the tradition of Gita. So,
okay, and was there any earlier philosopher who, than Shankaracharya, who expressed this intellectual, strong intellectual point of view in his commentaries?
I know only one. So it is a preceptor of Shankaracharya, the guru of his guru, Gaudapada. He wrote a poetic commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, and he also very intellectual oriented in this commentary.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm not a professional philosopher, I'm a philologist, so it was very important for me to know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan. So just one remark about Ramanuja and Vishishta Dvaita, that Bhakti there was also a very complicated way. It's not only emotional or, actional way. There is a term karma jnana samuchaya, and Bhakti presupposes that an adept has a very careful and very difficult way of knowing knowledge of Brahman and karma, yoga realizations, and only after that he probably, if God wants that, probably he will stay on the way of Bhakti. So Bhakti in Ramanuja's system is not very simple. It's a very complicated way, very difficult, but he added
to jnana and karma, he added this emotional life of personality. And I have another question. So I liked your presentation very much, because as I understood, you are only student at the third course, third year. It's and as I know, in Moscow State University, the philosophical faculty, there is a program very deep and very complicated, as in every other Russian university philosophical faculties. It's specialization European philosophy. So the most attention of all courses are put to European culture and European philosophy. And I'm not sure that there is a possibility or chance to learn Sanskrit language easily, or there are many courses in Indian culture philosophy and so on. So I'm very impressed that on the third year of your learning in Moscow State University, you are presenting presentation in such good level. And your Sanskrit also is very nice. And who is your teacher in Sanskrit?
My live-in teacher is Marcis Gasuns, and my guru, whom I have only books, only texts, is Zalizniak.
Oh, yes. So my congratulations to Marcis, because we see hala of his, of his activity, and very good. I'm very impressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that we take over our section, today's session today, and we have lunch time. And 3 o'clock we will meet again, and there will be Sanskrit linguistics and literature, very interesting session. So you are welcome, please. So bye. Thank you, everybody, participant. Every presentation was very brilliant and interesting and very, so it was a real discussion, I think. Thank you very much for all participants. Thank you. I hope we will see you later in other conference.